Y el mundo de los videojuegos va más allá de los videojuegos. También ha llegado a las pantallas del streaming, y en este caso de HBO con un documental que desde ya les recomiendo. Guerra de consolas, Console Wars. Y estamos nada menos que con sus creadores. Esto, además de ser un documental, es un libro. Primero fue un libro y después un documental. Estamos con sus creadores. Ahí están Jonah y Blake. Hi guys, how are you?
Hey,
How's it
we're
going?
great.
Okay, let's try your
Thanks for having
Spanish
us.
first. Come on. Let's try, Blake. Come on.
Sí, okay. Puedo
Hola,
hablar un
¿cómo
poco
estás?
español.
Great. It's okay. It's okay. You have 10 points for you. Okay. Yeah. Blake, Jonah, you are here in Argentina game show. A lot of gamers are watching this, so thank you for being here. We are such big fans of your documentary because we can see a lot of the things that we were looking when we were very young, like you, right? Both of you are from the 80s, the 80s. So I think you were there when the war began, no? So Blake, first for you, how was the idea to make first the book and then the documentary, or if it was at the same time?
Sure. So that is correct that Joan and I grew up in the 80s, and so we were on the front lines of this battle between Sega and Nintendo. And I was trying to think of the best way to describe this battle and why it was so fascinating to us. And I can't help but notice your shirt. You've
Yeah.
got the itchy and scratchy, and it was kind of like itchy and scratchy Sega Nintendo, and like itchy and scratchy, it's really itchy fighting scratchy and doing all the stuff, and it was really Sega going after Nintendo, and that really, as we began to investigate the story and got to meet the people, got to meet the men and women behind the scenes, we realized that there was this compelling universal story there, and it has taken many years between the book and the documentary, but it has been such a joy. Partly because it is such a fascinating story, and partly because gaming is one of those few things in the world today that can really unite audiences. Whether it's in Argentina or United States or in Japan, it's this thing that we all have in common that shaped our experiences. And getting to hear about the story behind the scenes was a joy for us and a joy for us to tell.
Jonah, one of the things that it's great in the documentary is about uh, the war. It's like an agent's war, right? It's like you like the Soviet Union and USA. It's something like that. It was like that in that moment. They are like fanatics, no? One from Sega and one from Nintendo, and they are fanatics, man.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to compete in that business that didn't really exist yet, you had to be. There was no way. Nintendo had 95% of the market. If you were going to take on this Goliath, you had to, throw that small stone you have and throw it hard, because there's no other way you're going to take market share unless you really go after them. And that was Sega's plan and Tom Kalinski's plan. And against sort of what Japan really wanted them to do, Tom did this and took on Nintendo and later in the film we explain how Nintendo kind of was fighting its own David and Goliath battle, and they had to do the same thing when they were going up against the Atari and the failed video game market of the early '80s, and because of that they really they were their own David in a David and Goliath story.
Uh, Blake, the figure of Tom Kalinske is it's like the number one, right? In your documentary, it's like he's the main character, man. So I want to ask you about that.
How is he a real guy? It's like even before Sega, this guy had the biggest impact on our childhoods, other than our parents.
Yeah.
With Flintstones, Chewable Vitamins, and Barbie and He-Man, Master of the Universe. It's I can't believe he's a real person.
Yeah. So how was for you guys to interview him? It was like it was possible to do this documentary without him or not?
That's a good question. I think that you're right. I don't think it would be. Tom was such a central part of this story not only as the leader of Sega, taking the company from 5% of the market to 55% of the market, and not only because he had this, scrappy mentality and was able to rally the team together, but he also provided such an important perspective for the film because he was an outsider coming into the game industry, and he was able to represent, for the viewers, our perspective coming in to see this industry from a new perspective.
Jonah, we are in the middle like a new console war. We can say that. I don't know, but we can feel it something like that. So, Jonah, what do you think about this new war? It is a war?
Well, we are. Right now it's the latest console wars going on, but I think it's much different because back then it was if Sega competed, they if they didn't win, they were out of business, completely gone. Whereas these are Sony and Microsoft. They're obviously a big part of their businesses, but these companies will go on without these video game companies. Tom Kalinske would not have a job if he didn't succeed at Sega. And Nintendo at that point, same thing. It was when they would not have a business. They would be strictly a Japanese company, not having an American impact, and these guys wouldn't have jobs. Today, it's a much bigger thing. But I also think that in the 90s, these executives are going head to head. Howard Lincoln, Tom, Peter Main, they didn't like each other. They were going after each other. And that was the climate then. Now I don't think it's about the executives. I think it's about the internet and fans of Microsoft versus fans of Sony kind of going after it on the internet. Some people saying, oh, we don't even care about the console war. So there's the Sony guys, the Microsoft guys, and then leave us alone. We just want to play games. Mm-hmm. But in the end, these two companies doing battle did the same thing that Sega and Nintendo did, and that was make games better, make the quality of everything better, and sort of letting the consumer be the winner of these console wars because they're getting higher quality games because these companies are competing.
Mm-hmm. Blake, Jonah, were you a Nintendo guys or a Sega guys?
I personally, I wanted to be a Nintendo guy. I very badly wanted to be a Nintendo guy, but my parents would not get my brother and I a Super Nintendo because the games were not backwards compatible. So I became Team Sega, and I was proud to be part of that team.
Okay. What about you,
For me,
John?
I was a Nintendo kid. I had an original NES. Never had a Super Nintendo. I had the original NES. Got it a little bit late. My parents were always like a year or two behind everybody. I actually think I might have gotten the NES like right before. It was probably on the discount right before the SNES came out. And then I didn't get a new system until the Sega Saturn.
Wow.
Because Tom Kalinske did a big event.
Yeah.
In Disney World, and I saw the Sega Saturn. I said, amazing. And then I was a victim of the fact that Sega Saturn kind of fizzled out and didn't have enough games. And, now I know the true story behind sort of the hardware architecture of that and the challenges they faced.
Great. When you watch this amazing documentary, you think, wow, these two were giants. These two were there for all the eternity. So what happened with both of us? Because, as you say, one, Nintendo is not one of the main consoles now. It's clear. And the other one is just a studio, right? So what happened with those two giants?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things that happened. Probably the two simplest ways to put it is the business changed. The cost of doing business is so much higher. So even though, in our opinion, Nintendo still does it at the highest level, they make the best games of any studio out there, it's just too hard to compete with the resources of Sony and Microsoft. Yeah. And then the other thing too is I think that there was some element of hubris, a little bit of flying too close to the sun, especially in the case of Sega, and trying to do the same thing over and over again didn't work, and eventually your time runs out.
Mm-hmm. Do you know that this war...
And the complex relationship, I was saying the complex relationship sort of between Sega of America and Sega of Japan also, that really was sort of the end. One thing you learn from the documentary, I'm giving it away, is, Sega could have had PlayStation. They could have had N64. Yeah. They didn't because it was rejected by Japan. Japan wanted its own system. Yeah. And maybe that was the right decision at the time, but as we look back, obviously, those are the systems that kind of really won that next war.
Of course. The what if, right? The what if story.
Right? What if, yeah.
Love what ifs.
Exactly. So, do you know that this war, to you, Jonah, this war settled the basis for the industry as we know it right now?
I'm sorry. You said did this set up the industry?
See, yes, this war settled the basis for the industry that
Yeah.
we have right now.
Yeah, I mean, there were video games before, but it wasn't. This is when video games were in every family's home, where there are different companies competing for market share and then creating a much bigger industry. And I think that's what's so exciting about this time. I think it's also interesting. Like they were doing the business tactics they were doing back then. Going when Walmart wouldn't carry Sega products, they went down to Arkansas and they put billboards all over the town. They gave free gaming centers for people to go to. They took over a town, and business is not like that today. So I think they not only set up the gaming of today, but set up a lot of marketing of today.
Yeah.
You know, the guy who was behind the Sega commercials, Jeff Goodby, ended up becoming ad man of the decade. Did the Got Milk campaign, which in the U.S. was one of the biggest ad campaigns ever. I'm not sure how if they ran it in Argentina, but it was probably one of the biggest ad campaigns.
Yeah. Do you know the story about Sega? that that Scream that is of course it's on the documentary, but it's not told no in the documentary. Do you know how it was created,
Yes.
Blake?
Yeah. So the documentary is 90 minutes, so there's so
Yeah.
many great stories we couldn't include. And one of those great stories is how they came up with the Sega Scream. And it was a combination of they felt like the commercials without an ending felt sort of naked. They needed something at the end to really add energy. And then they just asked people who happened to be working on set that day, not professional actors, to try to say the word Sega. And then this one guy named Jimbo Matheson said Sega in a very weird, interesting, Japanese inspired way.
Yeah.
And he ended up becoming famous and making a lot of money off of being the guy who said Sega.
That is great, and we are repeating that all over the years. No? Yeah.
Good.
Every kid in America did too.
Yeah.
Every kid in America growing up, Sega.
Of course, of course. Two more questions, guys. Jonah, one, it's the Mortal Kombat. It was like a game that, of course, it was very, very important in this war, right? It's shown in the documentary, but I want to know more about that.
Well, I mean, it was the first game that it did so well in the arcades that they weren't going to be exclusive. You know, a lot of times, Nintendo's like, oh, if you want to be on our system, you're exclusive. Mortal Kombat was such a big game that it was going to be on both systems.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is Nintendo and Sega released different versions. And it was a real turning point. Nintendo took out the blood, it took out the gore, and by doing that, it alienated the audience more than they thought. And they even admit that, oh, we shouldn't have done that. And Sega ended up beating them 5-1, and that's what really pushed Sega over the top. But at the same time, it also was one of the games that really got the government looking at games and rating systems, and the blood, the gore. If you look back into the movie and you see what the U.S. are talking about, it sounds crazy today because it was so little by comparison.
Yeah.
But the blood and gore, created the Senate hearings, which ended up going on to create the rating system for video games in the United States, which is still in place today. It's an important game on many fronts. It was the first really violent game that had a lot of success, and also on multiple systems. And Nintendo adapted at that point and decided, let's let the blood in Mortal Kombat 2, and that's a big thing for Nintendo to do. A huge thing for them to admit a mistake like that.
Of course. Blake, Jonah, we were thrilled to have you here, and we want more, man. We want more. You will be working in more documentaries about video games?
We'll see.
Oh, come on.
Nothing. We'll see. We love this world, and we love that there's so many fans, and we think if it is our job to be the ambassadors for these great stories, and so we're so glad to be here in Argentina, reaching a new audience to tell this incredible, inspiring tale that we've got to be a part of.
Jonah, what are you working right now in?
A bunch of different projects. We are throwing around a couple different video game ideas. Typically, our ideas, we really have to spend a lot of time researching and finding the story beyond the characters that would be in a documentary. We have some stuff we're working on in the documentary world. We'd even spent time with Ralph Baer, the inventor of video games, before he died, and filmed him. Which is fascinating. I don't know if you know the story about him. He invented the brown box, which became the Magnum Odyssey. But right now we're just looking for our next idea and putting together new ideas and going from there. And really enjoying possibly getting Console Wars out there as a TV show soon as well.
Right. Blake Harris, Jonah Tulis, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
It was great to have you. It was great to watch your documentary Console War. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Console Wars, ya lo pueden ver a través de HBO. La verdad se lo recomiendo muchísimo. Como dijeron ellos, 1 hora y media. Y la verdad que vale muchísimo la pena y nos quedamos con ganas de más en la Argentina Game Show.